We'll go ahead and get started. Um,
Okay.
just to let everyone know who's in the Zoom room currently, we are on with Congressman Newhouse. He's here to give us an update as to what's going on. Before we get started, I just wanted to say thank you to our program partner, STCU, for helping us transition to this virtual platform. They've been really gracious in their assistance and their help with planning these so far. We'll have webinars coming up next week as well, that on next Wednesday and next Friday, that will be on our Facebook page. And with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Congressman Newhouse. He has some words, and then we will go ahead and start on some questions.
Okay. Well, thank you, Logan. And just very, very briefly, thank you very much for having me this morning. As we all work through the awkwardness of the new way of meeting these days, but I think we're getting better at it. We're all becoming quite proficient at Zoom and Microsoft Team and all kinds of different things. I just want to say real briefly before we get started that the federal government is, responding quickly and doing all it can to make sure that not only the Americans stay healthy, but that our economy can be as resilient as possible for when we finally get out of the stay-at-home orders and all of those things that are keeping us from our businesses and workers from their jobs, and really impacting everybody as far as our ability to make a living and make sure businesses are successful. So I want to thank everybody that's listening, the business community of the Tri-Cities for what you're doing, making sure that your employees are safe if they're still at work, or encouraging people while they're home to really be responsible. This is on all of our shoulders to make sure that we all do what we can to flatten that curve so that we can get things back to normal as quickly as possible. So with that, Logan, I look forward to hearing what everybody's interested in, and I look forward to the conversation.
Well, we did receive quite a few questions through email and through Facebook. So starting off here, this one came in through email. They're wondering, will there be any funding available to the industries or companies that are forced into a long-term closure? As in, many of the current assistance seems to have an expiration date of about 2 months.
Yeah, great question. And a lot of unknowns in this. We don't know how long this is going to take. And so Congress is trying to be as flexible and fluid as possible, responding to things in real time. We all know, even the best run and most secure businesses can't continue for months on end with zero revenue. We in Congress recognize that, and like I said, while we're trying to do all we can to ensure the health and safety of every American, we also realize that we have to have our economy set up to be resilient and be able to bounce back as quickly as possible after the pandemic crisis is over. Our businesses in the state of Washington, it seems particularly the small businesses, have been affected by the economic impacts of the virus for longer than most in the country. As you know, we are in unprecedented times. We're working to make sure that these unprecedented programs like the Paycheck Protection Program are working as efficiently as possible. As I'm sure you understand, the federal government's response is it's fluid. It's responding on a regular daily basis to changing challenges. And with such a huge undertaking, I guarantee there will be adjustments to be made as we continue to watch how things are responding. So I can tell you that there's bipartisan support for ensuring businesses across all industries can survive this outbreak. When we are able to fully restart the economy, In the short term, there's also bipartisan support and a great need to expand the funding for small businesses, which is originally contained in the CARES Act. And I'm happy to see that the Senate, even as we speak, is considering additional funding. Efforts were made yesterday to pass that under a unanimous consent. It was not successful, but I'm hopeful that they will continue to meet over the weekend and that we'll have some results the first of the week to make sure that those new programs have enough money in them to be able to respond to our business communities.
All right. Next question. It's what will be available to those of us that may be forced into closure through the summer or perhaps even longer?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question. Put a $1 trillion question. Unfortunately, we don't know how long these shutdowns will be, how long they'll last. I'm being cautiously optimistic, but that being said, I want to make sure people understand that Congress gets this, the importance of keeping businesses afloat. Our small and local businesses are truly, it's been said many, many times, but are the economic engines of our country, particularly in the Tri-Cities. We have a booming business community, and I, as well as all my colleagues, are committed to providing continued support as we get through this crisis together.
And the next one we have, again, sort of about funding. The majority of assistance is geared towards the businesses located in Seattle. In addition to the state funding, there have been many programs offered by companies such as Amazon and Facebook, to name a few, that us little guys that are affected equally cannot even apply for. Is there any intended assistance that will be geared towards the businesses located in Eastern Washington?
Yeah, I understand the individual's concerns here. Sometimes it feels like those of us on the east side of the mountains kind of end up with the short end of the stick in most things. However, I've been working with my colleagues around the country to be certain that there is relief available for rural communities. And I know we don't always think of the Tri-Cities as necessarily rural, but certainly in Eastern Washington, it does qualify. I've been working with all of my colleagues in the Washington delegation, as well as those around the country, and the governor's office, to ensure that smaller communities, rural areas like ours, are not excluded, and that we receive the relief that we need. It shouldn't matter where you live. We're all Americans. We're all feeling the impacts of this pandemic equally, and we should all share in the relief that's being provided by the federal government. I would, take a second here to urge everyone to take advantage of those programs that are being established in the CARES Act. The Paycheck Protection Program was designed with small and medium-sized businesses in mind, in addition to those who are self-employed and working, those many people who are working to fuel the economy that don't have employees. So if you're having problems accessing this assistance, that, as you can imagine, thousands of businesses around the country are applying for these programs, and so honestly, the system is being overwhelmed, but everybody engaged in this is committed to making it work. And so be patient as much as you can. If there are issues that we can be helpful with, please contact my office. I got to tell you, the Secretary of Treasury, Mr. Mnuchin, has been very, very helpful in responding to things that are brought to his attention that are glitches or problems in the system, so that they can get this working as efficiently as possible. So we're committed to doing that, and we will work with you and the Small Business Administration, the Treasury Department, to if there are any problems that arise. Please do look into these programs and try to take advantage of them while you can.
Right. The next question we have is regarding testing. And this person is wondering, why did the federal government stop funding COVID-19 testing?
Stop funding COVID-19
Mhm.
testing. So actually, the federal government has not stopped funding of the COVID-19 testing. So we passed a couple of bills already. The family's first coronavirus relief, which was I believe it was the second package that we passed, as well as this third one, the CARES Act. Both of those expanded the availability of testing to all Americans. Under both those bills, there's no cost for the tests or related diagnostic procedures. And we're hopeful that that will encourage people who believe they may have been infected to get out and receive that testing. At the same time, there's a lot of local healthcare providers that are receiving federal dollars to increase their testing capabilities. In fact, I believe that the first round of that funding is going out today. We do have drive-through testing services set up. There's some in Central Washington, in fact, and some of these are being run by local health care providers. In some cases, even being operated by the National Guard. So the federal government is stepping up to increase the amount of testing, and I think that's a key part of what we need to do in order to get the country back to work.
All right. Sounds like they're staying busy.
Oh yeah.
Our next question is, why is the federal government snatching up ventilators away from the states?
Well, first of all, we've got to make sure that the ventilators, the PPE, which I think everybody knows what that stands for now, but personal protective equipment, are being available and used in states where there's the most need. As we've seen over the past few days, ventilators that are on loan from the National Strategic Stockpile that came to Washington are being returned so that they can be utilized in states that are struggling to provide care. It was determined in the state of Washington that we had more than we needed at this time, and others have a more dire or crucial need. So we're trying to distribute them to balance where they are and where they will be most necessary. But having said that, the fact that we turned back some, that doesn't mean that the state of Washington is clear, that we're out of the woods yet. Our hospitals are currently at a capacity where they can safely handle the number of COVID patients with the less critical equipment like ventilators that we currently have. I think that yesterday was announced, you probably have seen, that the governor determined that the field hospital in Seattle that was set up at CenturyLink Field is now being moved to another state, again, where there's a more critical need, move assets where they're most needed. And I think that's a good thing, but I also believe, I've got to believe that that's good news for the state of Washington. It means that our the things that we're doing, the preventative measures that we're taking are proving to be effective and are working.
All right. The next question is, why isn't the federal government coordinating an effort to distribute ventilators and much needed PPE to the states instead of making them bid against each other?
So, like I said in the last question, the federal government wants and needs to make sure that the limited equipment that we have is going to the states with the greatest need. And that's tough, because everybody feels like that it's a crisis in their state and they need everything available to them. At the beginning of the pandemic, as you remember, we were number one, right? Washington, because we were essentially the original epicenter of the COVID-19 in the United States, we received and we continue to receive a lot of support from the federal government. In fact, I was gosh, when was that? It's almost a month ago now that I was in Tacoma when the vice president came to meet with the governor and other mayor of Seattle, Pierce County executive, a lot of the different elected officials around the area, to hear and listen to them and hear what the needs were so that the federal government could respond in kind. And the partnership there has been great, and the response has been great. So it's not absolutely not to say that, you know, our hospitals, our healthcare providers don't still need this critical PPE, but unfortunately we're seeing a national shortage, including face masks, gloves, gowns, all those kinds of things. The CARES Act provided significant funding for additional PPE and incentives for companies that don't usually manufacture those things to start producing them. So we're starting to catch up. The supply and demand is starting to be more balanced, but it's taken some time. And so making sure that those essential equipment is distributed where it's most needed has been kind of a Rubik's Cube, honestly, but it's something that is very important to be sure that people have the equipment they need when they need it.
Mm-hmm. All right. The next question comes from the same person. It's, when will we have coordinated, succinct safety guidelines for the entire country to follow to help mitigate the spread of COVID-19?
Yeah. Great question. So the President Trump, released coronavirus guidelines for America. I think it was at least a month ago now. Those guidelines were crafted with the help of the coronavirus task force in coordination with the CDC, Health and Human Services. As we've known for weeks, the best way to stop the spread of the virus and flatten that curve is, like I said, that's becoming common in our jargon these days, is to practice good hygiene, something that our mothers told us all the time when we were growing up, right? Wash your hands, don't touch your face. Now we're learning all about social distancing. Those are the kinds of things that we are proving the state of Washington are actually working. So by limiting your exposure to the virus, we can prevent further spread. As we know, you can't see the virus. Many people can carry it without showing symptoms, which makes it especially difficult. So for those reasons, we're working to limit interactions even with people that appear to be healthy. Of course, now we've got essential industries that have to continue, that we depend on. Certainly our healthcare heroes, the new soldiers of today, the farmers and farm workers that produce the food that we need to keep on our tables, and several other essential industries, you know, police and fire and all those kinds of things. And they're all implementing additional safety procedures to make sure that they protect the workers who are continuing to serve our country.
And you mentioned the essential industries, so I think that kind of leads us to another question. This person is asking if you have any concerns about the Washington State essential workers list and when or if it'll be revised.
So yeah, that's been a topic of conversation, and thank you for bringing that up. I've been raising this issue in the last couple of weeks with the governor. Let me first say that I support most all the actions the governor has taken. This is a tough thing to have, you know, the health and safety and well-being of 7 million people on your shoulders, and there's a lot of decisions that have to be made, difficult decisions, and I appreciate that. And the governor, for the most part, has been doing a great job. Those of you that know me know that the Governor Inslee and I don't always see eye to eye, but in this instance, I've been very supportive. But there is, having said that, there is one part of the essential industries list that I've been working with him on, trying to asking him to amend his proclamation and include the construction industry, particularly residential construction, so that we don't make worse the housing crisis that we have in our state. that's a key industry. It touches so many different parts of our economy. Most every other state that has the stay-at-home orders in place and has come out with the essential industries have included residential construction as essential. Interestingly, we haven't, but there are some construction projects that are being allowed to continue, mostly the public projects like the Washington State Convention Center or the new National Hockey League arena. Those kinds of things are allowed, which is a little perplexing. If a construction worker in Seattle can be safe, why can't a construction worker who's maybe building a condominium or working on a condominium complex in Kennewick be safe? And I think there's some inconsistencies there. The industry, the construction industry, has come up with a great set of procedures and protocols to ensure safety of workers, following the CDC and other sources. And so I think it's a fairly easy change to make in the proclamation to allow this essential industry to move forward that positively impact our economy and also continue to provide necessary shelter for a lot of people. Food, farmers are essential. I think housing, those construction workers should be considered essential as well.
All right, then the last few questions we have are all kind of around funding. There's been a lot of talk about the funds available in the CARES Act. And so this question is, will there be any additional small business funding beyond what was included in the CARES Act?
So we talked about that a little bit. Congress did put in a lot of money within the $2.2 trillion that was appropriated to respond to a lot of different things. We're watching that carefully, making sure that those pots of money are sufficient to provide the bridge that small businesses will need in order to continue to be able to be viable and then be ready to bounce back and be resilient when we can open the economy back up. That's what is being worked on right now in Washington, D.C. Between House and Senate leaders. Like I said, there was an unsuccessful effort yesterday to pass by unanimous consent another $251 billion into these programs. So I'm hopeful by Monday, sometime first of the week, that we will be able to make that happen so that these programs continue to be there for businesses around the country. If we can't do it by unanimous consent, which that would mean that Congress would have to all come back to Washington, D.C. And that's going to be difficult at best. There aren't that many flights flying today, and more are being taken out of the schedule all the time. So plus the added risk of bringing all those people together. So we're hopeful that we can do this in a less structured, formal way.
All right. And this question, you kind of talked about it just now. Is there a projection of when the funds passed in the CARES Act will run out?
Well, that's a good question. It really is. Most of these funds have been distributed or beginning to be distributed now. We're seeing a huge amount of interest on the part of businesses around the country. So the projections are that within a week or so at this rate that those funds likely will run out. And so that's why it's critical that we want to make sure that they are replenished before that happens. So I don't know that there's an official projection necessarily. That's something that's being monitored every day, and we'll continue to do so to make sure that those additional funds are there when they're needed. So again, I would encourage people to apply, to look into these programs. I can't tell you that they won't run out of money. We don't have an endless supply of money. That's a whole nother issue that we have to address when this is over. However, if you're thinking that this is something that would help you, get through through this pandemic issue that we're faced with the economy closed, I would encourage people to take advantage of it as soon as possible.
All right. Then our last question is there an idea of when the United States will exit the current recession, and what's being done to make sure Washington State is protected?
So we clearly are in unprecedented times in our nation and our state's history. I would say that we're in probably one of the greatest challenges that we've ever faced. When I spoke on the CARES package on the House floor, when we passed that a week and a half, almost 2 weeks ago now, I likened it to 9/11 and said that this was our 9/11 moment for our generation. And so how we respond now, how we can continue to work together in a bipartisan fashion, I think will determine the resiliency that we can show coming out of this pandemic. I'm proud, really am, that the House and the Senate and the President came together quickly to get that package across the finish line, providing aid to our hospitals, for our workers across the country, for our small businesses, even our medium and large businesses. These are, like I said, clearly challenging times, but if we continue to work together while separate by 6 feet at least, and heed the advice of the CDC and make sure that we take this social distancing seriously, I believe that we can quickly move from the immense focus we're having on this public health component and really target the economic health and our well-being. I know there's a lot of businesses struggling across the country. Congress understands that as well. Some places are already closed and probably closed permanently, and many are on the brink of having to do so. We've never seen anything like this in our history that I'm aware of. And I'm absolutely committed to doing everything I can to make sure that businesses can keep their doors open and continue to be what we all proudly say are the backbone of our economy. And that's really what we need to achieve here. So, great question. I appreciate that.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot's being done, so that's reassuring. That covers all the questions that we have that we've received. So in closing, I just want to ask if you have any comments or advice to give to the small businesses here in the Tri-City area.
Well, I've seen a tremendous amount of creativity. People are being very thinking outside the box of what they can do to keep the wheels turning to some extent, and that's great. That's really inspiring to see that kind of entrepreneurship out there. Appreciate that a lot. And like I said, the federal government is working as hard as it can to respond, to provide that bridge that we need to get people across this pandemic crisis that we are in right now, so that we can come out the other side of this as resilient and respond as quickly as possible to get our economy back up and running. I would say, Logan, that bringing out or trying to bring these programs to bear in such a short time, it's not without problems and hiccups along the way. And so if you're applying for any of these programs, I really want to emphasize the need to be patient. There will be glitches. There probably will be some wrinkles along the way. And like I said, we stand ready to help if there's anything we can do, or if you see a problem in the system that we need to bring to the attention of the Small Business Administration or the Treasury Department. We want to do that so that we can make it work as efficiently and quickly for everybody.
All right. Well, with that, that covers everything. Congressman, thank you for your time today. I know you've been very busy over the last few weeks, and thank you to your staff. So,
yeah, they've been great. I've been depending on them a lot in this time, as you can imagine. We're all working from home.
Right. All right. Well, we really appreciate it. Thank you again for your time today.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you all for what you do for the Tri-Cities area.
All right. Have a good day, everyone.